Hey, gun people. All right, continuing this understanding exigent circumstances, what the cops can do, what they have to consider, what they have to know, when they have to know it. What are your rights as a pesky citizen to ensure that the government doesn't overstep their bounds or give themselves wiggle room to where you can't take action against their unlawful conduct? Here we go. U.S. versus MAXI. Did officers illegally enter the property surrounding the defendant's home to conduct a knock and talk? Now, a knock and talk is any place a cop can go to talk to somebody. He walks up to the door, says, "How are you?" Blah, blah, blah. And that's considered a knock and talk. Remember, if the postman can deliver a package, if FedEx has access to an area, if UPS has access, if they can lay a package at your front door, then cops can walk up your front door. There's no expectation of privacy once you allow federal postal people onto your property. And if your mailbox is at your front door, you can't even deny the post office, federal government, access to your property. Take that shit to the bank. Anyway, did officers illegally surround the house to do a knock and talk? Did the defendant open the door voluntarily when the officer knocked? And was the officer's warrantless entry into the home justified by exigent circumstances? There's that term again. Here we go. Let's get some facts here. Narcotic officers with the Miami-Dade Police Department obtained information from an untested informant. That means we don't know nothing. That means any pesky citizen at the gas station can walk up to a cop and say, "Hey, that guy's a criminal." That's an untested informant. That the occupants of a certain duplex was selling drugs. Wow, nosy neighbor syndrome. While conducting surveillance on the property, officers saw two men exit the duplex and drive off. Now, most cops aren't going to set up surveillance unless this untested informant gave them specific information like, "I live next door. There's cars coming in every 15 minutes. They leave and stay. It's never the same cars. I don't know who lives there. It appears they're selling drugs, blah, 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 blah." And they go, "All right, we'll sit on the house for a couple of days." When I was working with the drug task force, a call like that would come in. We'd have a guy go sit on it. When there's nothing going on, let's go sit on this house, see what we see. All right, so this is what the officers are doing here. I'm assuming he did this to a drug task force or something. While conducting surveillance on the property, officers saw two men exit the duplex. Nothing unusual about that. Drive off. Nothing unusual about that. Some of the officers stopped the car. Some of the officers stopped the car about a quarter mile away. But the two occupants were not arrested. Now, this is what we do, what's called a pretext stop. If I want to stop you, and people will say, like, "You can't stop somebody." Yeah, I can stop anybody on the road. There's thousands of vehicle code violations on how big your tire, how much your tread is, whether it looks unsafe, whether a tire looks wobbly. I have to stop you for public safety, whether you have something on your mirror, whether you have a decal that might have struck your vision, you swerved in the lane, you went left to center, you didn't give a signal far enough, you gave a signal too long, you were going too slow, you cannot drive without government finding a reason to stop you. So what they did, and what we used to do, is we would follow some tie till we got a violation. Once we got a violation, we would pull them over. We would ID them. We'd run them to see if they have drug charges. We would say, "We stopped you because you have a crack in your windshield, and you need to get that fixed because that's a safety issue." It was a lawful stop. Remember, the Supreme Court ruled it doesn't matter what my intent is when I stop cars as long as I have a violation. Meanwhile, every year they add 5 or 10 more new violations in the driving code, if not 20 more new violations. Anyway, I digress. California, I think, had well over 2,000 or 5. It's crazy the amount of violations in California vehicle code. But here we go. As the men drove away, remember, they stopped the guy a quarter mile away, but they were not arrested, so they let him go. As the men drove away, however, the driver immediately turned and headed back to the duplex. Is this odd? Maybe not in and of itself. None of this is odd. But we have a tip that they're selling drugs. When we stop two people, I'm sure they asked them questions like, "Do you live there? Why were you there? What were you doing there?" Then if they ran the guys and they had trafficking warrants, they had prior drug arrests. One of them was on probation for drugs. They were prior felons for drug prison sentence. So we have all this information that we really don't know here, but let's just say as the men drove away, The driver turned and headed back to duplex. That's not normal for you to leave a house and go back. Could it be normal? Could you have forgot your wallet? Could you have forgot your mixed drink that you put in the Coca-Cola can so cops would think you had a Coke? It could. I don't know. If and buts coconuts. Because the possibility that the men planned to alert the other occupants in the duplex that some police action might be imminent, the officers followed them back. Any violation of law here so far? No, other than the cops explaining, yeah, I was concerned. You might warn them of what? Do you have a crime yet? You just have suspicion they're doing something. What's he going to warn them of? Of your suspicion? Is that a crime? While 4 or 5 of them covered strategic positions around the duplex, do we have a violation of law yet? Can cops surround a building? Do they have to have probable cause to surround a building? If the public can, now, if they surrounded the building by kicking in gates and cutting locks and climbing over the fences, then we've got a little bit more intrusion. But if they just simply set themselves up in strategic areas so they can see if somebody ran from the house, no violation. I'm good with this. The others, meaning the other officers, see, while 4 or 5, this should say why 4 or 5 others officers covered. But anyway, the others, he's talking about other officers, ran to the front door, which was situated behind a metal security gate. Now, metal security gate may not mean something in some areas. Some people say it's a bad area. You know, people who engage in drug activity or unlawful or illegal activity, a lot of times will fortify their house because they know they're subject to being ripped off by other criminals, because criminals will rip off criminals. What? Rick, I thought criminals had a code. Well, that's because you're an idiot. All right. One of those officers were able to reach through the bars of the gate and knock on the door. We have a violation? If he knocks on the door and he reaches through the gate, is that a problem? If you said yes, you're wrong. There's no problem with that. He can knock on the outside of the door. He can knock on the inside of the door. He can reach through the door. He's not penetrating the barrier of the house. He's not reaching inside the house. He's merely reaching through an outer gate to knock on the inner door. No problem. We have no exertion of police powers as of yet. He did not announce he was a police. Does he have to announce? No, he does not. Unless he's demanding entry. If I'm demanding entry for a search warrant, then I must say, police, demand entry. Police, search warrant, demand entry. Then I have to announce. If I just want to knock on the door and do a knock and talk, I'm not there to exert government authority or power. I'm just like the postman delivering a package. Hey, is anybody home so I can deliver this package? I got a crazy cop story. If you guys remind me of the postal in the subway, cop dressed as a postman pulled out a gun. Anyway, all right. MAXI, Mr. Pad, opened the door and informed the officer that he didn't live at the duplex and didn't know who did. Suspicious? We have a person in the house that answers the door that doesn't live there and don't know who lives there. That could be a clue. Remember, each of these little facts by themselves are nothing, but when viewed in the totality, they can kind of indicate or lead us to a fair probability that there could be illegal activities going on here. So far, I don't think the cops have done anything wrong. While speaking with Mr. Pad, the officer saw crack cocaine packaged for sale in plain view behind MAXI. Okay, so here's where everything changes. We had only maybe suspicion, maybe some facts that could lead us to believe, maybe get us close to probable cause. At this point, when a cop sees crack cocaine packaged for sale in plain view. Now, people are going to say, well, how does he know it's crack cocaine? How do he know it's that? Well, when an officer says something like that, he's working drugs. If I was testifying, I'd be like, when I looked in there, I saw a white powdery substance placed in small baggies, and there were 10 or 15 baggies wrapped, and next to it was a brown paper bag which cocaine is commonly delivered or stored in, and it was wrapped in a brick about the size of a brick, which cocaine is probably sold in, probably a kilo, and therefore the packaging material was next to a scale, there was white powder on a scale, and there were empty bags as if they were packaging it. That's what I would testify in court. But for this, we're just going to say the officer saw crack cocaine packaged for sale in plain view behind MAXI. Then he would explain it more. The officer asked MAXI to step outside. He asked him. But he claimed that he could not do so because he did not have a key to the security gate. Now, if I wanted to be a creative cop doing trickery, I could say at that point, I felt this guy was being held against his will. He was trapped inside a house, and it was a safety standard. If there was a fire in a house, this guy couldn't even get out of the house. He didn't know who owned the house. He's in a house, and the gate's locked. I was in fear of this man's safety, and I wanted to make entry under exigency to protect this person. Again, that would be bullshit, but you can see how if you want to lie and manipulate the law, it's very easy to do so. Especially the more experience you have, the easier it is to do so. So the officers forced the gate open and detained him. Any problem with this? I have no problem with this. Once you see a crime going down, and he saw this in plain view, he can seize that evidence because it's in plain view. Rick, it wasn't in plain view. He was outside, and he had to look through a gate. It's in plain view for him where he's at. And as long as an officer is allowed to be where he's at, he can see whatever he can see, and then he can seize what he can see. All right? Good reason to have your blinds closed on your house so cops can't walk by and look in your window and go, holy shit, I'm walking by and I saw an automatic weapon that appeared to be an automatic weapon, and I had to force entry to seize the weapon to save the public. All right. So, the guy said he couldn't step outside, so they saved him because the gate was locked in case there was a fire. They forced entry and opened and detained him. They then conducted a protective sweep. We've talked about protective sweep. Officers can secure a house where they have to work to make sure nobody's going to come out and ambush, or there's not other people hiding and lying in wait that may destroy evidence or attack the officers. They then conducted a protective sweep of the premise and saw rock, cocaine, trafficking paraphernalia, weapons, and a stack of money. Ooh, a trifecta. Maybe a quadfecta. All right. They secured the duplex while obtaining a search warrant. I'm totally okay with this. Secured the duplex, meaning we did a protective sweep. We detained anybody we found. We held them there until we got our warrant. That's what's called securing the place. Basically, we seize it. It's under our control, and we dictate who comes, who goes, what you can do, and where you can be. The affidavit was based entirely on the information the officers obtained before they conduct a sweep. This is critical because if they did, now I think they could have put it in there, but it wouldn't enhance their probable cause. So the affidavit is what an officer writes to get a search warrant saying, here's what stats, here's the statements and facts and circumstances on why I believe there is evidence of a crime in this area that I want to search. And here's where I explain it. So that's what the affidavit is. So in the affidavit, he only put the information that they had before they conducted a sweep. I think they're okay putting information after the sweep, but they didn't do that. So what does that mean? That means while we're conducting a sweep, when I opened the one of the closets door, there was a safe that was open, and there were stacks and stacks of what appeared to be bricks of cocaine. They didn't put that in there, even though they saw it, even though they could have put it in there, because they were looking in a closet where a person could be hitting. Now, if they opened a desk drawer and saw a gun or a severed hand or body parts or, another brick of cocaine in the desk drawer, they could not use that in their affidavit because a person couldn't be hiding in a drawer. And when you're conducting a protective sweep, you can only look in areas where people could reasonably be hitting. Under beds, maybe under the couch, in closets, in large areas that could conceal a body. I cannot look in desk. I cannot look in small places where a person couldn't be. All right, so we have to get all these little areas need to be considered when you're doing this. MAXI and 7 others were indicated on it. So it sounds like they found 7 other bodies in the house. Were indicated on a variety of conspiracy charges related to a drug operation. MAXI motion to suppress the evidence was denied, and he was convicted. I agree. I'm okay. There's nothing that should have been suppressed in here. I'm good with these guys. Discussion. On appeal, MAXI argued that the evidence should be suppressed because the officers had unlawfully entered his property, that he did not voluntarily open the door to the officers, and that they forced entry was unlawful. The court rejected all these arguments. I would agree with all those arguments. You had somebody in your house that opened the door. If they opened the door, that's not the officer's problem. The officers didn't kick the door. Somebody opened it. And when they opened it, it revealed numerous evidence of crime being committed. So I agree with the court on this one. Okay. Entry into the property. A general rule, an entry by officers onto property immediately surrounding a home to speak with a suspect, a.e. a knock and talk, constitutes a search if the purpose was to obtain evidence or incriminating information. Now, I got a problem with incriminating because I'm always looking for incriminating information. When you look through the door and you saw that cocaine, you're looking for incriminating information. My question to the officers would be, when you knocked on the door, what were you going to talk about and what were you looking for? And the officer would probably say, I wasn't looking for anything. I was going to ask him that, hey, two guys left here. They didn't know they were here. And then I knocked on the door and there's a guy in here with the door locked. He doesn't have the key and he don't know the whole of the place. What the hell's going on here? That's how my conversation would have went had I not found the drugs. And then if the guy talked to me and go, fuck you, I don't want to talk to you, slam the door, then I have nothing. I have nothing more than I had, and then we leave. Unless I want to try and get a warrant on the two guys making a U-turn trying to get back to the place. Unless when I stopped the two guys, one of them said, dude, I told you we were going to get busted, man. That's bullshit. I don't have anything. It's not my house. I don't want to be involved. That's some kind of statements that would lead and raise suspicion. At least it would raise it for me. The people out there that think I'm a jackboot cop would say, man, that's bullshit. That was nothing. You're just jump. All right, whatever. Okay. A knock and talks constitutes search violation. All right, let's see what else they say down here. A search. However, comma, lawful if the officers entered only those areas to which visitors had been given express or implied authorization to enter. 2, their conduct on the property was not substantially different from what it would be expected from an ordinary visitor. That means as a knock and talk, I can't say, hey, it's the police. You need to talk to me. Hey, don't shut the door. Now, that's not what an ordinary visitor would do. It's your home. You do what you want. Once you start exerting police powers, you lose the knock and talk theory. In other words, a search will normally result if the officers conduct or demonstrated an intent to conduct an informal interview, but neither of these requirements were satisfied in the MAXI case. For one thing, the officers did not restrict the presence to the area in which visitors had given complied consent to enter. I'm not sure what they mean there, meaning the guy opened the door and they were allowed to see. This is because some of them took up strategic positions around the perimeter of the duplex. And this was not something that the visitors are impliedly permitted to do. In addition, the officers' conduct after they arrived was inconsistent with the conduct expected of visitors. So this is what they were arguing was wrong. As noted, there were about 10 of them. There's a lot more of them. There's a lot more than the number of people who ordinarily pay unannounced visits. Who cares? So what? As the court pointed out, people do not invite an armed battalion into their yard to launch a raid. I don't know about that. Accordingly, the court ruled that the officer's entry onto the property constitute. Oh, man, the court ruled it was an unlawful search because the officer surrounded the building. Wow, I'm kind of surprised on that one. The court also ruled, however, comma, that evidence discovered as a result of their entry onto the property need not be suppressed. Well, if it was unlawful, why wouldn't it? Well, we're about to find out. This was because the Supreme Court has ruled that suppression is not mandated when the officer's illegal conduct did not directly or indirectly result in the discovery of the evidence. So they're saying that when the cops surrounded the house, it did indicate a search. However, the cops surrounding the house did not dictate whether or not they saw what was in the house. And here it was apparent that crack cocaine in MAXI's entryway would have been observed by the officers regardless of the manner in which they entered the property. So we're going back to inevitable discovery. This is because, as discussed later, MAXI was unaware that the officers had entered his property until the door was open. So that was key. Had MAXI said, hey, I saw the cops come there. As soon as I saw them, I knew I was screwed. I got screwed and I couldn't do anything. I knew they were going to come in. I didn't want to hide the dope, which I would have hid if I saw them because I was afraid they would shoot me. Then he would have the defense and the evidence would have been suppressed. Remember, statements have meanings, which is why you don't talk to the cops until your lawyer can say what you would have said had you said it, but you didn't say it. Okay? It's all clear as mud. Remember? Opening the door. Because people do not expect visitors to demand entry or otherwise assert authority over them, occupant decision to open the door in response to such will render the entry involuntary. As the court pointed out, when a person opens the door in response to the show of official authority, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about identifying yourself. Police, open the door. That act cannot be seen. That act cannot be seen as consensual. Thus, any evidence that the officer saw will result in suppression. If the officer at the door had demanded entry, it would have been clear that MAXI's act of opening the door was involuntary, and any evidence that was observed would have been suppressed. But the court determined that MAXI was unaware that anything was happening outside. Therefore, the officer did not demand entry. He just knocked. Consequently, the court ruled MAXI's decision to open the door. They're saying his decision. It was his decision, or his occupants or people that he allowed to have access to his house. Ruled that MAXI's decision to open the door was unaffected by anything that I'd call her. Therefore, MAXI was unaware of any coercive circumstances that might have caused him to open the door. The warrantless entry. Although the officer at the door had probable cause to arrest MAXI when he saw the cocaine, a warrantless entry would have been unlawful unless MAXI had consented, which he didn't. There was exigent circumstances, which there was. 1. Such action of search has no destruction of evidence, meaning that warrantless entry will ordinarily be lawful if the officers really believe that the evidence on the premises would be destroyed if they waited. And this is always the case. Anytime you have drugs in a house, it's very easy to destroy drugs by flushing them or washing them down the drain. That's why exigency, when drugs are involved, are almost always held up. Don't shoot me. I'm just telling you the way the law is and what's going on. Taking note of this rule, the court concluded that the officer's entry was lawful because he had seen a substantial quantity of drugs in the front room, and he reasonably believed that if he would be disposed if the officers delayed search until they got a warrant, which I agree. The protective sweep, finally, MAXI argued that the officer's protective sweep of the duplex was unlawful because they apparently had no reason to believe that any other person with motive would. I don't have to believe there's a motive to destroy. I just got to make sure that no one is there that they can destroy. Okay. Even if that were true, it did not matter. Pursuant to the independent source rule, evidence that was obtained illegally will nevertheless be admissible if the illegal search did not contribute to its discovery. As noted, all the evidence seized from MAXI's house was obtained during the execution of a search warrant. Now, because after they got the warrant, they researched the house. If the warrant had been based solely on the officer's observation of drugs and paraphernalia that occurred during the sweep, meaning if they'd add other shit, if they didn't see the drugs, they did the sweep and then saw the drugs, then they would have went, no, we ain't playing that. But since you saw the drugs and then did the sweep, it's okay. If the sweep was ruled unlawful, the independent source rule would not apply. Any evidence obtained during the search would have been suppressed. But this didn't happen here. Instead, it was apparent that the officers would have sought and obtained a warrant when they saw the coke everywhere, based solely on the discovery of packaged cocaine that was observed when MAXI opened the door. This was enough for the court to conclude the officer's decision to apply for a warrant and the judge's decision to issue it both constituted acts that were independent and anything that the officer saw after they entered. For these reasons, the court ruled MAXI's motion to suppress was properly denied. Sorry, denied. See you later, MAXI. Have a nice pad in the prison. All right, we'll end that there. Another case, again, where exigency and officers' decisions have to be reasonable. You have to be able to lay out facts and circumstances that are reasonable. You can't be making up shit like I kind of did in here a little bit about kicking the door because he's locked in there and he's safe. All right, we'll end that there. On to the next one.